here we are. We are talking about moving from stigma to understanding. As you guys know, today is World Mental Health Day, and these are the types of conversations we want to be having throughout the year because there are so many misconceptions and myths around mental health or mental illness. And we want to break that down because we know that that is a huge barrier as to why people don't seek support and live life according to their full potential. And so we are going to go over a lot today, and we're going to move through some of these things quite quickly because there's just one thing that I have to say about it. But towards the later slides, we will get into what you can say, what you can't say, what is harmful language, what you can do to take care of yourself. So we'll get into that. So we'll talk about what is mental health and what it is not, why it's vital for us to address mental health misconceptions, the top 10 that are out there, and then what are the consequences of these misconceptions? And you guys might already know some of this because the consequences are on the individual, the community, and on the workplace. And then I want to share with you the facts that actually tackle the misconceptions, so why they are not true. And then we will talk about how to challenge and change that, as well as harmful language that we can stop using. And I will say that I even know mental health professionals that use this language. So there's no like, oh my gosh, you're such a bad person for doing this. No, it's just that we're not even aware that that actually is a microaggression. It actually stigmatizes, it isolates, it shames the people that are struggling with those conditions. So just so we're all as we get into this talk, I want to say that mental health conditions, mental illness is the number one stigmatized illness. Okay, it is a number one stigmatized condition for people. They carry a lot of shame around having a mental health condition. And often that stigma is because there is a lack of understanding about this. Like, it's the other person. It looks like that. And the media definitely does not help as they, talk about it in terms of violence or in terms of when someone does something wrong. We hear, oh, well, this person had a mental illness. So we just associate that, okay, all people are violent that have mental health conditions. So 50% of the people out there are actually frightened of someone with a mental health condition. And 4 out of 5 people say that it's harder for them to admit that they have a mental health condition than any other issue that they might have. So, and I want to also say that I'm not using the term mental illness throughout this presentation. I will call it mental health condition because oftentimes the most common mental health conditions or illnesses or diagnoses are depression and anxiety. And these are the most common ones. And most people don't feel ill. When I say, well, there's a mental illness, it doesn't seem to resonate with people. So I call it a mental health condition. If you want to call it a mental illness because it empowers you and you feel like it's a validating way of speaking about your concerns, I encourage you to do that. However, through this presentation, simply because of the feedback that I have received in earlier years, is that I'm going to call it a mental health condition. But these are diagnoses such as depression, anxiety, addictions, that people or substance use, abuse. When we talk about these types of things, people don't feel ill, so we will refer to them as mental health conditions. So let's talk about what is mental health. So I want you to think about it as being on a spectrum. It's on the spectrum. You have good mental health, and then you have poor mental health. And then outside of that sits all the conditions and illnesses and diagnoses. Now, good mental health is when we are sleeping properly, we're eating properly, we're exercising, just like good physical health, right? We feel we have energy, we can concentrate, we can do things, we want to go out. And then we start to, there's a project due, or someone is coming here for a visit, or it's, you know, the holiday season, and you might be going out, you might be staying out, you might be drinking, you might be doing other things, and you start to teeter off into the poor physical health. The same thing goes for poor mental health. Okay, so when you are keeping up with your mental hygiene and your mental health rituals and ways of taking care of your mental health, you are within that realm of good mental health. But most people will dismiss it, they will deny it, they will ignore it, they will do all types of things, and they will move into that poor mental health space. And if they stay there for too long, eventually it becomes a condition, which is diagnosable. Okay, so think about it as a spectrum. You don't just wake up one day and say, I am depressed. It's not like that. It doesn't happen. You don't just develop a addiction overnight. You start to use substance, then you abuse substance, and then eventually it becomes a substance dependence. So it is this kind of slippery slope towards poor mental health, and we sometimes don't even know how we got there, because day to day things build up, and eventually it might be a small thing that actually puts you over the edge, and then you are really struggling. And a lot of times people, actually I won't talk about that. That's what I will say about this. So think about it as on a continuum. Like physical health, mental health is the same. Now, what is mental health and what it is not? Well, mental health is something we all have. This is not the same thing as a mental health condition. Mental health, like physical health, belongs to all human beings, okay? We all have it when we feel good in ourselves, when we have healthy mind, we have a healthy mind, we have healthy thoughts, we have healthy feelings, and we feel like we are able to contribute to our community. We are resourceful for the people that are around us. We feel we are empowered. That's going to be, you are now in good mental health. It's on a continuum, it's flexible, it's changing. Right now, I can sit in front of you guys and tell you, well, I'm feeling a little bit compromised right now, where there's a lot of resources being pulled just due to everything that is happening in the world right now. There's a lot of weight on my heart. So my mental health is being challenged right now, and I'm not in the space of poor mental health, and I have to up my self-care. I have to up inputting into my resources, because a lot is being drained from me just due to everything that is happening within my family, within the world, within our community. Those are the things that are weighing heavy on me. So it moves. One week it's like this, another week it's like that. And we have to constantly be doing this kind of check-in with ourselves, like, where am I at right now? What do I need right now? Oh, I'm feeling like there's a lot being pulled from me right now on my resources. Okay, I need to up depositing energy and depositing self-care to up the resources to meet the demands. And I want you to think about it that way. Do your resources meet the demands? Whenever your resources don't meet the demands, that's when you start to slide over into that poor mental health space, okay? What mental health is not is something that only weak people have. So just take that concept out of your mind, that this is just, oh, well, I don't need to take care of it because I'm not, there was no depression in my family, or there's no anxiety in my family, that I don't have to take care of my mental health because I'm not a weak person. If you are a human being, you should be taking care of your mental health. Something that it only exists in our brain or our mind. We now know that our whole being is connected. What you do with your physical body impacts your mental and emotional body and spiritual body. So these things are together and they affect each other. Mental health Good mental health is not about feeling good all the time. Life is hard. And some days are good and some days are not good. And some days you go to bed defeated and some days you get up and you are, ready to go. And those are the ups and downs of life. And we cannot expect to be happy all the time. We cannot expect to have an Instagrammable life all the time. We have all types of things that will show up for us, and we have to show up for all of that and make space for all of that. And mental health is not a fixed condition, okay? So that is what mental health is and what mental health is not. So let's talk about the 10 misconceptions that we hear all the time that a lot of people believe. And I want you to think about like, maybe I believe that. Maybe this is something. So raise your hand if you've thought about any of this stuff before. And no one can know who you are. So it's, it would be good for you to just say, yeah, actually, I do believe that. I don't know anyone who's struggling with their mental health. Only certain types of people get mental health conditions. Mental health conditions are not as serious as physical health. You can snap out of any type of mental health problems. People with mental health conditions cannot function in the day-to-day life. That's what I believe. Mental health conditions, they can't get out of bed, they can't do things, they're really compromised. Mental health condition is a sign of personal weakness. If tomorrow you were struggling, would you go and get support from a mental health professional? Or would you say, no, it's not that bad, because you think you can fight that, or that you don't need support? If someone has a family history of mental health conditions, they will also develop it. If I ignore my psychological or emotional pain, it will go away. Time heals all wounds. Who believes that? People with mental health conditions are dangerous or violent and cannot be successful. Mental health conditions are lifelong conditions, are untreatable. Who believes that? Yeah, so there's quite a few of you here that do believe these things and have heard these things, have been told these things. And there's literally no shame in that, guys, because this is what is perpetuated in the media. This is what we are all familiar with. Even school teachers or HR bosses or parents, like, they believe these things. I know I can say that my family, if I were to just talk about mental health, they would, the older generation that are my elders, like, they would all be like, come on, man, you guys can snap out of it. Like, we hear these things. So this is like, we then internalize that. And that internalized stigma results in a lot of shame, isolation, and low self-worth. Because there is stigma. There is public stigma, what the world believes, but then there is internalized stigma. We believe that, right? If there was, only publicly people are believing these things, that you can snap out of it and that you can't be successful if you have a mental health condition. If only the world believed that, but I didn't, then I would have no problem going to get help if I was hurting. But no, the thing about public stigma is that we internalize it. And it results in so much suffering. 2 out of 3 people will wait. I think the average is 7 years before they get support for their mental health condition. They will just suffer in silence. They will. They will think that, no, it's not that bad, or I can do this, or no, if I admit it, something will happen to me. So they will delay it. They think they will get over it. And then they might use things like substances or other types of addictions to cope. And that's what it results in, is that you start to numb it. You numb it, and addictions start to form in this way. And eventually, when the addictions get so bad, that's when people say, okay, now I might need to get support, or someone in their life might say to them, now you need to get support. So there's a whole sort of trajectory that happens when someone is struggling. It starts as a struggle and stigma associated with going to get support. So the consequences on the community is that it leads to a lot of fear and mistrust. And I really just, I wish I could, I don't know, it feels very disheartening for someone who's been now on this awareness mission for the last 18 years at least, that we're still in that space because of the way the media portrays a lot of these things. Now with social media, we're seeing that some of that is shifting a little bit, but even some of that is not necessarily accurate, where people are sobbing and recording themselves, that might not be accurate either. I do appreciate a lot of the people that are public figures that are coming out to own that, so they can dispel some of these myths and say, hey, listen, I'm a successful actor, or I'm a successful CEO, and I struggled with this. Like, that really is quite empowering. But when we have the stigma, it does affect that, public policy. It affects funding. There's, less emphasis placed on mental health. And so even things like insurance coverage is impacted by things like stigma, that, oh, well, mental health happens only to some people, mental health issues happen only to certain people, and not seeing that physical and mental health is literally the same, and that you can cause yourself to have physical health conditions through your mental health stress. And so not covering that in insurance is also mind-blowing for me. Obviously, it leads to people not being able to contribute within their societies, within their communities, which is a very important part of the definition of being a mentally healthy person. And then obviously we are now just reduced to, oh, this person is manic, or this person is bipolar, or this person is OCD, or this person is psycho. We use these types of terms and we just box them up, and then we put that person away and we become other than the other person, not realizing that mental health conditions live amongst us. And then obviously within the workplace, there's also just, without proper understanding, there's going to be burnout, there's going to be higher turnover, reduced job satisfaction, there's going to be discrimination, reduced opportunities for people. Because there was a survey done in Wales where 1 out of 3 people are afraid to speak about their mental health condition because they think they're going to get fired. And I actually don't know if it's safe enough to talk about that yet. So if someone came and said, well, what do I tell my employer? I cannot tell them, go talk to your employer, because I actually don't know if it's psychologically safe within that workplace. I actually don't know if that employer is going to make space for something like this within their company. So it would be really foolish of me to give people advice that says, hey, listen, you need to go talk to your HR and disclose that you have a mental health condition. You really have to think about where you are. 1 out of 10 people talked about how they believe that having lack of discipline or willpower is a result, or lack of discipline causes mental health conditions. So these types of things still exist. 1 out of 12 women said they wouldn't marry someone that had a mental health condition. And then we wonder why no one wants to talk about it. Oh, actually, so let's talk about, now we're going to just get right into the facts of things, guys. So when it comes to misconception 1 and 2, which is, I don't know anyone who is struggling, and only certain types of people get mental health conditions. So guess what, guys? You all know someone who is struggling. 1 out of 4 people in your life right now has struggled with a mental health condition at some point in their life. I am one of those people. I had a time in my life where I qualified for the diagnosis of clinical depression. I don't consider myself a depressed person. I consider myself to be very optimistic. But like I said, the resources that were in my life were far less than the stressors and the demands of my life. And that threw me into that space of, I'm no longer in poor mental health. I am now compromised. And so that for me felt like, okay, I need to now take care of this. This is becoming a clinical condition. And yes, I was a psychologist already at that time. Yes, I had all the coping skills at that point, but it can happen literally to anyone, any age, any gender, any race, any religion, any IQ, any profession. Everyone can struggle with this. It does not discriminate. It's the leading cause of disability worldwide, and it is a major contributor to the overall burden of disease. Depression is the second most common condition, the first being heart disease, but it is also the second most common illness amongst all illnesses. This is a pretty big deal. It's a real thing. When we say to people that you can just snap out of it, misconception number 4 and misconception number 3 being mental health conditions are not as serious as physical health conditions. According to the World Health Organization, they talk about disability ranking. So how a condition affects your ability to go to work, to engage in life, to engage and take care of yourself, okay? And to contribute to community and to your own home. And when they look at these, I want you to just look at the bottom. Mild depression, mild, which I can probably say so many people I know are probably clinically mildly depressed. It is as severe and has as much of a disability ranking as epilepsy. We would not tell someone who has epilepsy that you should just stop having a seizure. I think you can will yourself into that. Come on, just put your mind to it, right? We would not tell someone with chronic Hep B or relapsing asthma to just breathe. Just focus on breathing and you will be able to breathe. We wouldn't say such things. Yet, when someone comes to us and says, I'm really struggling with my anxiety and I'm really having a hard time, just getting out of bed every morning takes a lot of effort from me, and that is severe depression. There is high functioning, moderate depression, and then there is severe depression, which is really, really, it can really impact a person's abilities, and that has the same disability ranking as disseminated breast cancer. So these are just, it's a real thing, guys, and it impacts us. And I know that there are people on this call who actually have high functioning depression or high functioning anxiety. And when I was depressed, I was able to get on and get up and manage my children. I didn't have the luxury of staying in bed. I wish I could have. It took a crane to lift me out of bed every morning and a consideration, do I have the energy even to brush my teeth? Like, it was really very debilitating. I wasn't working at that time. I had to actually take a sabbatical until I sort of figured that out. And then I was like, oh, wait, this meets the criteria. I thought maybe something else was wrong with me. So when you're in the darkness, you actually don't realize that, well, there's something going on here that I'm not really familiar with. So this is where I say to people that it can be very disabling and it can be very disheartening when people just tell you, snap out of it. Because trust me, if there was a way, people would do it. So yes, there is high functioning, and then there's very severe, and somewhere in the middle lie many of the people where they are going to work, they're tending to their children, they're going to see their parents, they're doing the things they need to do, but they literally can't feel joy. They can't engage. They can't do the things that give them pleasure. They can't, they can't experience life fully. And that would be considered a mild depression. They can't concentrate, they can't focus, they can't sleep properly, they can't be motivated to do anything. These are the symptoms of depression. The fifth misconception is people with mental health conditions cannot function day to day. Yes, you can have anxiety and appear confident. You can have suicidal ideation and turn up to work just fine. You can have a panic attack in the bathroom and come up on stage a few minutes later. You could be battling with depression and be the funniest person in the room. You can have ADHD and appear super organized. You could be living with an eating disorder and still participate in the communal meals. You could be struggling with an addiction and still meet your social and professional responsibilities. You could be high functioning and still be struggling. So these two things do not go together. And if you are struggling, there's only one person that knows that, and that is you. Because usually people say, well, how can you know that someone is hiding it? I'm like, you ain't gonna know, because they're that good at hiding it. They're that good at masking it. They're that good at denying it that you would not know. And we all know, like, celebrities like Anthony Bourdain or Robin Williams, like, you would never, ever, ever imagine something like that. But you don't know. And that's the thing about internalized stigma, is that only they know, and only you can get yourself to the help you need. So the sixth misconception is that mental health conditions are a sign of personal weakness, which is not true. Mental health conditions are a result of biopsychosocial and lifestyle all coming together in this thing that happens in our mind and body that results in you struggling or having these types of symptoms for a duration of time, which then qualifies you to have a diagnosis. So sure, you can have a predisposition. So I could say I have anxiety or addictions or depression in my family and not have any of those issues. Because the seventh misconception is that if someone has a family history of a mental health condition, then they're more likely to have that. And that's not true. Well, they're going to develop it. That's the misconception. They have a risk factor, but if their protective factors are more, then that gene does not turn on. So if someone, I know lots of celebrities who said, my father was an alcoholic, or my mom struggles with anxiety, so I've just been in therapy my whole life because I am being preemptive with that. Or I don't drink alcohol because I know that it is in my family because my father and my grandfather, so I just don't even want to turn that gene on. So that's how some people did, because they have a family history of that. But there's other things like thyroid disorders, vitamin D deficiency, having a high-risk pregnancy, being on certain medications can actually throw off the biology. So the first thing we always say to people, that if you are struggling and it looks like depression and it feels like depression and you're feeling tearful, go to your general practitioner, go and get your blood work done. Because a lot of these issues, I had a client who had thyroid. And, she got diagnosed with hyperthyroidism, but she thought she was anxious. But she's like, I don't understand this. I'm not sure what's happening. And that was a thyroid imbalance. So these are just some of the things you want to consider when you are having a lot of symptoms, but you just don't understand where they're coming from. It could be that your body is under a different kind of experience than your mind, okay? For sure, there are psychological factors like low self-esteem, having a very loud inner critic that you haven't worked with, cynical or pessimistic outlook on life, perfectionism, being labeled, patterns of comparing yourself to other people, or if you have a previous history of mental illness, trauma, child abuse, neglect, these are going to put you as a risk factor. Remember, when I say risk factor, that does not mean you have a mental health condition if you have these things. It's just that you are more likely to have that than someone who doesn't have these conditions. Even things like social factors, pandemic, being an expat, loneliness, bullying, discrimination, minority groups, these types of things can all put enough pressure on the system. And then, of course, we are learning more and more and more about lifestyle factors. We know about the gut microbiome, we know the gut-brain axis, how over 90% of your serotonin is developed in your gut. not in your brain. Serotonin is the happy chemical. Dopamine, 50% of the dopamine is in your gut. So if you feel demotivated, if you feel unhappy, look at your gut, because that is supplying your body with the serotonin and the dopamine that you need. Irregular sleep patterns, not moving, not relaxing, not abusing substances. Thank God there's a lot more information now about even a little bit of alcohol can throw your whole system off. And people I know are social drinkers, but then they're socializing every night of the week. You know that that's going to have an impact on your mental health. Using social media a lot. Like, nothing good comes of that. Nothing good comes of that. First, you're probably going to see things and hear things that are going to be either traumatic, or they're going to trigger comparison, or you're just going to be disengaged with everyone else in your life. So the things that actually are protective factors, you cannot invest in because you're on a screen. So nothing good comes of excessive social media use. I'm on social media. It's like a full-time job for me, another full-time job. It's a second job for me. And I take it very seriously. And I've got all kinds of guardrails in place that make sure that I don't slip into that place where they want me to slip into, which is high engagement, which is another word for addictions. So that is another risk factor. And then replacing our in-person interactions with online stuff, voice note, phone call. Like, no, we are coded. All the stuff in the lifestyle is what we are coded for. We have lived on this planet for thousands of years, coded with this. We need to move. We need to eat of the earth. We need to relax. We need to sleep. We need sunlight. We need togetherness. This is our code. And when we are not operating off of our genetic code, then there's going to be chaos within that system. There's going to be dis-ease, disease. Well, if I ignore it, psychological pain will go away. This is time heals all wounds, the misconception. Guys, if left unaddressed, you will have an increased risk for worsening of the symptoms. I have yet to see someone who said, I'm feeling really horrible, and they qualified for a diagnosis, and then they just didn't do anything about it, and then they got over it, and it didn't come back to them at some point in their life. I know people that are in their 60s that did not heal with some of their relational traumas that they experienced within their 20s that are saying, I wish I dealt with that then. So it stays within us. It corrupts something within us, or it becomes calcified in some way. And then, of course, those who are in that kind of acute state, those who are really struggling right now, you will feel more compromised in your cognitive abilities, your concentration, your memory, your decision-making. These things get affected. You are cognitively impaired when you are struggling at that capacity. And it takes 5 times as much effort to write that email than if you were actually you were feeling better, or you were in good mental health. You can also be more at risk for developing additional disorders like addictions, eating disorders, these types of things where we try to get some sense of control or some sense of escape. Deteriorating physical health, that's for sure. You're going to be more at increase for lowered immunity, chronic disease, pain. I read somewhere that, up to 80% of the people that go in with GP type conditions is a result of stress within whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's work-related stress, like burnout, that type of stress, they will go, and their primary health concerns are going to be a result of what happened in their psyche. Of course, there will be resilience, self-worth, and self-esteem that's compromised. Your relationships will be more strained, and you will not be as productive. There's a field in medicine that studies psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology, which is basically the interplay of your psychology, your nervous system, your immunity, and your endocrine system, which is literally like our whole system. So it's like everything is talking to each other. So if I deny that negative pattern of thinking, it's having an effect on my gut microbiome, which is where the immunity is and which is where the serotonin is. Like everything affects everything else. And so it would be really important to address your mental health, because at some point it's going to play out in some other way. So early intervention, support, adequate care for mental health issues is so, so important. I tell people that when you come in for mental health treatment, when the issue is a rumble, it is much easier than when you come when it's really, you're in a state of sort of being devastated. Of course, there is treatment for both, but you recover faster the faster you go in. People that have mental health conditions are dangerous and violent and cannot be successful. These are all the people. We also know of sports, Simone Biles, and we have these athletes that are saying, I'm not gonna do it because my mental health is compromised. And I think that is a very mature thing to do, to say that I need to step out of the game because I need to take care of my health. And musicians are saying it, and actors are saying it. There are people who struggled. And then there are people who struggled, but they still did, they showed up in front of the world and we didn't know that they were struggling, like Princess Diana. But there are more and more people that are coming out and saying, hey, listen, this is real. It happens to every human being, and it can happen to every human being, and we need to just like not make it such a shameful thing. So we also know of other example, Winston Churchill, Anthony Bourdain, Robin Williams, Heath Ledger. Some of these people did not get treatment. And they really suffered. The misconception that mental health conditions are lifelong and they cannot be treated. Not true. They're actually highly treatable. And yes, medication management. So people say, well, medication, I don't want medication. I don't want medication. Okay. There's a place for medication in mental health treatment. And we need to stop shaming the medication. There are times in your life where you will be drowning. And at that time, doing therapy feels like an Everest that you have to climb, because therapy is hard work. Therapists do not have a magic wand where they put on you and you say, okay, I'm done and I'm on with it. And I think if you go in with that expectation that, no, I don't want medication, I just want to see a therapist, then, and you are really highly symptomatic, then you are delaying the success of the therapy. And there are people who will drop out of therapy because they don't think it works, but they actually did not listen to the therapist's advice or recommendation, I should say, their clinical recommendation to go see a psychiatrist, to be on medication for a certain amount of time. And then on side of that, they are getting psychotherapy treatment, and eventually they would get off the medication and they would have the skills they need. It's like you're drowning. We're going to throw you a life raft, and you are going to use that life raft. And then you still have to kick. It's still hard work to be in therapy, but you're at least going to have something that lifts you out of that darkness so you can tend to the things you need to tend to at that time. So I do think that we're better to say, okay, yeah, I'm seeing a psychologist and I have a therapist, but there's still a huge stigma around medication and a lot of fear around medication. If I take medication, I'll get addicted to it. Or if I take medication, I'll never come off of it. And those are just not true. None of that is true. You can be on medication for a short duration and come off of that medication under the supervision of a psychiatrist. So yes, medication management is a very viable, good treatment option for those people who need extra support to be able to tend to learn the coping skills that they need in order to, and then there are some people who will stay on medication for the rest of their life, and that's okay also, because they might be struggling with something like a bipolar disorder, and that needs more long-term treatment. But then the majority of the people who are struggling with depression and anxiety do not need to be on it for the rest of their life. There are some people who have recurrent depression, and they might need to be on it for a longer duration. So it's not just this one size fits all for medication. It would be really important that if you have questions about medication, that you speak to a psychiatrist, you get all your questions answered, and you make a very thoughtful decision of whether or not medication is for you, and how medication works in conjunction with therapy, and how that is considered the best treatment outcomes for many mental health conditions. There's also things like support groups. I think, it can be very isolating when you are struggling with something. So we have over 25 support groups at Lighthouse. Joining one of them makes you feel like, okay, I'm not in this alone, which oftentimes we can start to feel like we're in this alone. And then there's residential treatment programs for things like depression, for things like addiction. Those things are best, or eating disorders. Those types of things are best treated within a residential treatment program. There's psychiatrists, psychologists, counselors, therapists, as well as general practitioners who you could speak to in order to get on this treatment path for your mental health. 5 ways you can challenge or change misconceptions is going to be: 1, invest in personal education. Be informed, be updated, attend trainings like mental health first aid, engage with diverse communities, talk to people, talk to all types of people. When you think about diversity and inclusion in the workplace, you want to talk about not just diversity and inclusion when it comes to color or gender, but also when it comes to neurodivergent individuals. Just what does an ADHD person look like, and what do they struggle with, and what do they need support with? Be curious and invest in your personal education. The more you know, the less you will judge, the more you can be supportive, but also the more you can give yourself permission to be more human, more you can give yourself permission to seek support when you do need help. Become an ally. This would be really important when it comes to advocating for people. It's sad that we only advocate when something happens to us, but advocate for people that need your support. Be a voice, because they are a minority, and you do want to say, hey, listen, what are we doing for neurodivergent individuals, or what are we doing for people who have mental health conditions that are diagnosed? Like, what are we doing here at work or within our school? How are we tending to this? Standing up against discrimination, encouraging EAP programs, or offering resources within your websites for individuals who are struggling with their mental health, or people who just live with the mental health, because not everyone is struggling with it. Sometimes they're just living with it. They've treated it. They're working. Mental health is not always about a struggle. When you can have a diagnosis, be on medication, and not be struggling, you could just be living with that. And then provide feedbacks about policies and practices. A lot of companies don't have a mental health policy. Like, that would probably be a good thing. Like, well, how do I know as an employee what's going to happen if I come and tell you that I just got diagnosed with fill in the blank? What happens at that point to me? And having a mental health policy protects everyone, and also keeps it safe enough for people to open up. Challenge the stigma in daily life. correct misinformation, model inclusive language. And I'm going to give you some examples of that. Be ready with resources for people. This is why I'm really a big fan of the mental health first aid. The Lighthouse brought mental health first aid from Australia. We are one of 23 countries in which mental health first aid exists. The Lighthouse is the only provider of mental health first aid in the UAE, because I am such a big believer of building awareness. And the more informed you are, the more ready you are with resources, the more you empower people and the more empowered you feel as well. Talk about your own experience. Consider the benefits and risks of sharing your story, though. I think for me, it's really important that you really think about where you are, who you work with, what policies do they have in place before you go off and start telling everyone your story. It's really important, though, that if you are in a place that does allow for that you counteract these stereotypes and reduce misunderstanding and isolation and shame that often comes with people thinking about, well, that only happens to other people. This is one of the reasons why I say that, yes, I had depression at one point in my life. It happened once in my 40 years. And I know what happened, and I treated it, and I'm okay, and I'm functioning, and it's not like I'm living with it, but this is what happened to me. And it's very important that I say that I'm seeing a therapist. It's very important for my mental hygiene. When you talk about your own experiences, it says, well, okay, well, if it can happen to her, then it's okay for it to happen to me also. So when you speak your story, you give other people permission to be able to speak theirs as well. And then obviously you can support mental health initiatives, you can volunteer, you can donate. There's lots of mental health campaigns or causes that you can donate to. We have people buying scholarships for the community members who do mental health first aid training. And so those are just some ways that you can just say, I believe in this, and I'm putting where my mind, my body, my money behind this cause. Now, it's really important, guys, as we talk about stigma, that we think about our language. For me, it's really important. Language plays a very important role in shaping our perceptions and our attitudes around certain things. Anyone who knows me knows how precise I want to be about the language I use. But there are things that we are doing in our daily life that are perpetuating that stigma, and are, making people ashamed about being able to come out and say, this is what I'm struggling with. When we use terms like, oh, she went psycho, or she's nuts, or he's insane, or he's crazy. He's a narcissist. Narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition. It is a diagnosis within the diagnostic frame. So when we say things like that, there might be someone in that room who's in treatment for narcissistic personality disorder. They want to get better. No one chooses that, but it's probably one of the most stigmatized mental health conditions or mental illnesses out there. The second thing would be to define people by their condition. Or she's schizophrenic, or she's an addict, or she's an alcoholic. No, you don't want to do that. You actually want to say she is a person with schizophrenia, or she is living with an addiction, or she is struggling if she is within that struggling space, or she is a person with an addiction. Don't reduce a whole being into a diagnosis. Oh, she's a schizophrenic. Oh, she's a whole lot of other things too. So when we say that, we reduce people to one thing. Casual misuse of mental health conditions. She's so narcissistic. I'm so ADHD, because you People have no idea what ADHD can wreak havoc in a person's life. So when you just can't concentrate and you're calling yourself ADHD, you are minimizing the struggle of someone who actually does have ADHD. The weather is so schizophrenic, or he's so schizophrenic. I've heard this. I've heard executives who are really like at the top of their companies using this kind of language. And I'm like, you cannot say that, because that is not creating safety or inclusivity, or it really is quite quite a thing to hear people say such things. Or he's so delusional, I'm so OCD. Another thing is when people use stigmatizing phrases such as he's committed suicide instead of he died by suicide. When he's off of his meds, she's having a breakdown. They're all mental. Actually, I was on Kite Beach the other day and I heard, I went mental. And I think when we say things like that, there might be someone in that room that actually did have a mental breakdown, which resulted in a diagnosis. So thinking about ways you can describe what you went through without using these terms. Saying and validating things like, it's all in your head, you need to snap out of it, everybody gets sad sometimes, we all go through this sometimes, you look depressed, or you don't look depressed, just be positive. Yeah, that can further isolate the person. Making jokes about mental health conditions is another way we do this. We perpetuate the stigma. You belong in a straitjacket, or I think you need some electroshock therapy, or she belongs in an asylum. You never know, that person, someone in that room might have had someone who was in inpatient treatment. So watch what you say and find a way to say it that doesn't exclude someone who might be going through something. So these are some ways we perpetuate it. What can you say? These are some things we say. I would recommend taking a picture of this slide, because there are some things we say that can be very harmful. And then there are some things that we say out of unharmful, but they're unintentional harm. We don't mean to do harm, but they actually do more harm than good. Be strong. You just need to think about this differently. Look on the bright side. At least you have a job. I feel so bad for you that you're going through this. Again, all of these things can actually make the other person feel like they're in this thing alone. So, saying things, and sometimes we say this to our children, you're being dramatic, you're being sensitive, stop feeling sorry for yourself, you're so ungrateful. Like, these types of things can really break a spirit. What are things you can say? Just ask questions, give them room. When we say hold space, make space for their experience. How have you been? What's this been like for you? How long have you been feeling this way? Would you be comfortable telling me more about this? What can I do to help you? What have you been doing to take care of yourself? What can I take from you right now? That sounds so difficult, challenging. You're going through a very difficult time right now. I can't imagine what that's been like for you, but I'm here to listen if you want to talk. Thank you for opening up to me about this. I'm going to be with you. I don't even know what to say, but I'm so glad you told me. I'm here with you. What I'm hearing you say is that lately you've been feeling like, is that right? Mental health is just as important as physical health. Please don't apologize for crying. I'm here for you. That's a lot you're going through right now. And I'm with you. And I think if you just say, I'm with you, I see you, I hear you, your pain is real, your pain is valid. That's what we want to convey to someone who is struggling. So what can you do to take care of your own mental health? It's just good hygiene, guys. This is like, especially when times of stress, you got to crank this up. So as I mentioned to you, that for now, right now, it's a very stressful time with everything that is happening in the world. My kids adjusting to school, now exams happening, some tests happening, and work being full throttle. Like, okay, there's a lot of demands on me right now. So I now need to increase my self-care. And there are a few things you want to do. And when that pressure kicks on, you want to make sure that you reduce the things that drain you. Now, that doesn't mean you cut off from family or you disengage from everything that's bothering you. It's just that you limit contact. You say, okay, I'm not going to have lunch with you, Mom. I'm going to come see you for an hour. If that is the person that's causing a lot of drainage for you, or that friend might be causing a lot of angst for you, you might say, okay, listen, I'll see you. Let's go for a walk. And then that's it. So find ways to limit things that drain you during this time. Remove the clutter, whether it's your calendar, whether it's your workspace, whether it's electronics, whether it's social. Mute, unfollow, get rid of, clean up, make it a less stimulating environment around you. Limit the news and other media consumption. Guys, they have an agenda, and it is not only to inform you. They have an agenda, and it is to make sure that you stay on their news channel. So the most sensational, apocalyptic stuff is going to be on different news channels. And so you want to avoid that. You can be informed and not be overwhelmed. You can say, this is what's happening in the world right now. These are the people that need my support. This is how I'm going to support them. But you don't need to know play by play what's happening on the ground. If there is negative self-talk, you need to go talk to a therapist and start dealing with that inner critic and that shaming, because we want to reduce that inner critic's voice by having it or engaging with it in a way that says, hey, can you just be nice? So one tip that I like to give people, if you have a loud inner critic, don't tell it to be quiet, because it's never going to be quiet. It's just going to get louder. So I just say, can you say it nicely? And then my inner critic says it nicely, and then it's not so bad. So, and sometimes when I can't say it nicely, it's like, well, you heard me the first time. I don't need to say it again. So it's like, okay, I just need you to say it in a nice way. So that might be one way you can engage with that, and limit alcohol, smoking, and other substances during such times. You want to search for soothing, not solutions, when you are in high stress, because when you are in high stress, your aperture narrows and you literally are in survival mode. And when you are in survival mode, you cannot have perception. You cannot have a wide way of looking at things. There's a word, I'm losing that word. I don't know what that word is. But you want to bring safety back into the system, use calming sensory experiences, reduce stimulation, take warm salt baths, go into the sea, have weighted blankets that provide a sense of calm. I have a weighted blanket that I use. I think it's on my Instagram in one of my highlights. And practice essential self-care like sleep, eating. And if you don't know how to sleep, then it would be really important that you have a good sleep routine. I think I have a YouTube video on the Lighthouse's account on sleep. You can just go to the last 15 minutes and I've got that sleep routine down. You move at least 5,000 steps, stand up, take your meetings, standing up, walk, park further away. It's okay if you sweat a little bit. It's a human thing. And these are some of the things that you can start to do. Experience fun. When you laugh, it actually builds resources and it builds resiliency. So you actually are depositing when you are having fun. And then invest in a few people in your life, a tribe members that you are going to turn to and share your concerns with. Consider seeing a professional mental health practitioner if you are really struggling, or if you feel that everyone in your life is struggling and you don't want to go and bring your struggle to them. I would say speak to someone, lighten some of that, and then share with the people in your life. We do need to talk to the people in our life, that there's no substitute for having a tribe. These are some of our Instagram channels, and my LinkedIn channel is also this. Lighthouse, Lighthearted Parenting for Parents, Smart Hard Board Game for Parents, and then we have for young adults, you know, I would probably say teen to late 20s, we have this one. So you guys can follow those accounts if you would like. I'd be happy to take some questions now. I know we went to the full hour, 103 to 203, but I'd be happy to answer your questions. So we have a few here. So I'm just reading the question now. How do I approach a close friend who's deeply depressed and does not want any help? I don't know if someone doesn't want any help. So I would challenge you to say, well, what do you mean he doesn't want any help? Oftentimes the person who says, listen, man, I don't want to talk about it, is because they've been dismissed for so long. They've been lectured for so long. They've been advised for so long. No one has held space to talk to them. So I don't believe that people don't want to get better. I just believe that anyone who has tried to help them has done it in a way that has made them believe that they cannot be helped. So I would really encourage you to just go hang out with your friend, go for a walk and say, hey, listen, man, what's been going on? And I'll put this slide back up. Ask questions like this. Tell me what's been going on with you. What's all of this been like for you? How have you been feeling? How is that impacting the different areas of your life? How have you gotten by in the last few weeks or few days? These are the types of questions you want to get them to open up. And then don't shut them down by, but listen, man, it's not that bad. Don't say things like that. Just say, I hear you. I can see that it's so hard for you. I'm here. That's it. And if you don't know what to say, just reflect the feeling back. I can see that you're really struggling. I see your pain. I see how sad you are. And I'm with you. I like to put I'm with you next to everything because it makes them realize that you don't have to be better. I'll be with you when you're sad. And you don't have to be happy for me. I'll be with you in your sadness. And I'm not going anywhere. And we'll sit here until we figure it out. I accept you as you are. And I want to be with you where you are. And I want to sit with you in your fire, in the center of it. And we'll figure it out together. And if you want to stay like this, then I will be with you like this. Nobody wants to be sad. Human beings were built to seek pleasure and avoid pain. No one wants to be in pain. And if they are in pain, then there's something in that system that is failing them, that is not seeing them, that isn't able to support them. So that's what I would say to that. How do you avoid being burnt out from work? I would say do these things on a daily basis. If you are not doing the things that are just basic, like sleeping and eating right and moving every day and being with your family and being with loved ones, start there. Just do the essentials and work up from that. I made a video on my Instagram today that's just do small things, but you first got to do the essentials. Cannot come to a therapist and say, okay, listen, I don't want to sleep and I don't want to eat and I don't want to do movement, but I want you to make me feel better. It just doesn't work. Your body will not feel good. Your mind will not feel good. So it would be very important for you to do the basic essentials for your self-care. And guys, when you exercise, you know, John Brady, he's a Harvard psychiatrist who spent his whole career talking about exercise as an effective treatment, an equally effective treatment than antidepressants and anti-anxieties. So this is not like, I'm not making this up. The research shows it can be equally as effective if done with that level of discipline, that I'm going to do this every day for 45 minutes for my mental health. And I know I'm not motivated and I don't have willpower, but guess what? Willpower actually strengthens when we do things we don't want to do. So you've got to show up for your mental health. And now we're going to move into November, which is the 30-30 fitness challenge. It'll be a great time to start. Actually start now, and then you'll be ready to go when the time comes. Eat things that are of the earth, avoid things that are processed, hydrate, sleep properly, hang out with your family, have time of pauses where you're not on some device or another. These are just some basic things you can start to do to take care of your well-being. So someone said, how can I stop making food as my emotional comfort for stress relief? So people think of food as emotional comfort, but it can also be an addiction. So that is disordered eating. And it is not something that, if it's, you know, all of us can say, oh, listen, I need a burger. It's been a long week. Like if you're not one of those people, and if you really turn to food for comfort, then I would say you need to see a mental health professional who can help you figure out what is underneath that, and also develop other coping skills that are healthier for you than eating. I'm not sure I understood that question. How can you implement mental health feedback? Not sure what that means. So yeah, I think someone said that it can be expensive. What can I do? Like I said, start with the essentials. And John Rady, he said that if the effects of exercise were taken in a pill, it would be a blockbuster medication, because the effects of that are so powerful. So I would start with the basic, guys. And I'm not saying it's a cure-all and be-all. No, people that are athletes are struggling. So obviously that's not the end-all, but it is a good place to start. And if you're doing that, then build in other healthy coping skills. We post all kinds of content on our LinkedIn and on our Instagram that you guys can have these tips that you can say, okay, listen, I'm going to do deep breathing, or I'm going to do stretching, or I'm going to socialize, or I'm going to join a support group. I really encourage you guys to join our free support groups at the Lighthouse, because those are led by a licensed professional. And that's where you can get support for many of the issues that you might be struggling with. So there is ways you can tend to that. How to manage ADHD without medication. You're going to have to do a lot of therapy and a lot of behavioral treatment for that. You need to be highly, highly self-aware and deeply, deeply committed to your well-being. I know people that have ADHD that are not medicated, so it's possible. But it comes with like a sheer will and determination that you're gonna set some goals for yourself, and then you're gonna achieve those goals. All right, guys, thanks for being with me today. If you have any questions that I didn't answer, or you had questions that you didn't ask, but you might get asked later, you can Instagram direct message me, and I'd be happy to answer them. I'll see you guys. Bye.